This is our first official podcast episode. The episode before this is more of like an introductory episode. So, so glad to be able to get started with this and just get acquainted with you guys. So, it's just it's a couple topics. The topic of today is culture, and culture means a lot of different things to a lot of different people. There is not one set culture. There's not one parameter for what culture is. But today on this episode, we'll be talking about what culture means to you, what it means to me, what your culture looks like, what mine looks like, And this isn't a space for people to compare cultures or to see which culture to them is better. It's more of just a space to learn about each other's culture. That's what this whole podcast is about. It's about learning about each other's culture, getting to know each other, being able to understand each other. So, so I just wanted to start off with talking about what culture is. The definition for culture is the customs, arts, social institutions, and achievements of a particular nation, people, or other social group. So culture doesn't, I feel like a lot of people, and not, purposefully, but just ignorantly, associate culture specifically and only with race. Culture isn't just race. Your Boy Scout group can have culture. There are different dance teams that have a certain culture. There's schools even your school has a culture, and your culture kind of makes up like the energy surrounding that. So you go to school. If your school has a strong culture around football, it's a strong football school. There's maybe a little bit more money put into football or more money put into that. So just understanding the culture of any setting or surrounding you're in, it's very essential to succeeding and thriving in that setting. I personally have seen that it's difficult to thrive in a setting, to understand a setting when you don't know, about that setting. You don't understand the culture. It's hard to relate to that. So the first question I have for you guys and that I'll be answering is, how has culture affected you? Culture has affected me in the way of, growing up, it was just me, my brother, my sister, and my mom. There was not really a father figure for me and my brother in our lives. My sister was still in contact with her dad. So there, when it comes to culture, that's it wasn't too strong growing up just because of, my father is African, my mother's African American. We have culture on our African American side, but my strongest half of my culture comes from my African side. And, all my life I've never really been exposed to that. I didn't really know that I was African. I didn't know that what that meant to be. I think I found out around sixth grade, and at that age there was a lot of negative stigmas and negative association around being African. So when I did find out, it wasn't something necessarily that I was ashamed of, but I don't go around and show it as proudly as I do now. But even then, when I knew that I was African, I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know what culture was behind that. I thought that African American and African culture were just the same thing. I wasn't aware that there are different African cultures, many different African cultures. I thought that there was just you're just African. I didn't know about culture. As I got older, I was educated by different people. When I found out I was African, I started talking to different people. Involved myself in different groups, and that's when I began to understand who I was and what my culture was, what my culture meant, and what that meant to me as a person. I found out I was Ghanaian. I began to talk to different people who were Ghanaian and just understanding, different parts of the culture. Going back to the food and the clothing and religion, and even the various different languages we speak. I am not very fluent in any of the languages yet, but that's also a goal. I've set for myself is to become more connected with my culture and to understand more about the languages. My second question for today was just, how well do you know your culture? I've explained that, I'm still learning mine and why I feel like I'm somewhat knowledgeable. I don't feel like I'm as proficient or as knowledgeable as I should be, which, that isn't a bad thing. There isn't any negative, connotation to that. I shouldn't be ashamed of it. It's just I wasn't exposed to it till I got older, and so now it gives me an everyday goal for knowledge is to learn more about who I am, to learn more about my culture, and that's just something I strive to every day learn something more about. My third question was, what does culture mean to you personally? Now, me personally, when it comes to the word culture, to me that just means, the foundation of the basis of who you are. I feel like your culture makes up who you are. It makes up, your heritage, everything about you. I feel like a culture is like the base of a building. It's down inside you. It's under you, but it's a very strong part of you. Without your culture, you're not really, you're still you, but you're not you fully without understanding your culture, understand who you are. I feel like, to me personally, culture is very strong because culture helps build upon one's sense of self. I feel like going through life a lot of times, a sense of belonging. That's a lot of all humans, tend to find out something where it's a basketball team or a dance team or a school planning team. Everyone wants a sense of belonging to feel as if they belong somewhere, as if their presence is wanted somewhere. So, you know, understanding your culture, being a part of your culture, being very knowledgeable in your culture is, uh, it's very important to, you know, feeling like you belong. Um, Now, both of the cultures I happen to be blessed to be a part of are very strong, very, very noticeable, very eccentric. Being African American, when you say the word culture, there's so many things that pop up to talk about. There's the civil rights movement, and then there's slavery, which is a more negative part of our history, but it's nonetheless a part of our culture. It's a part of who we are, where we've come from, and it's led into the building blocks of who we are now. There are so many parts of Black African American culture that aren't known or are overshadowed by other parts of culture, such as the civil rights movement and slavery. They overshadow a lot of African American inventors or inventions. People may not know about purely because when you hear about Black culture, when you think about Black culture, you only think of the civil rights movement and slavery and Malcolm X and Martin Luther King. And while those are very important pieces of Black culture, I feel like culture goes so much deeper. It's deeper than the civil rights movement and slavery and hip hop, and it's so much deeper than that. And that's what I really, really want to on this podcast. Help expose people to and expose myself to even a little more is the deeper parts of African American culture. I feel like the thing that as Black people we can do the strongest is not just being proud of the fact that we're Black. Being Black is amazing. But understanding the gift behind being African American, understanding our culture, who we are beyond just the base things, beyond the surface. Going back and looking at kings and Mansa Musa and so many people in history who aren't talked about as much, for different reasons. Just talking about the people who really were very, very monumental in the building of Black culture. I think to me, when I think of what we must do as a race when it comes to Black culture, is education. I feel like a lot of people don't know about figures that aren't associated directly with the civil rights movement and things like that. So throughout my podcast, that's just what I hope to go and establish, hope to talk about is working more, just working to learn and educate everybody else, educate myself as well. That's pretty much it for this second episode. Again, I thank you all so much for tuning in. I know it's as we start off, it'll start off a little bit slow, but as we get into it, I have so much planned for this podcast, and it's going to get very interesting. It's going to be a very invigorating experience, a very mentally feeding experience. And not only in this podcast we talk about Black culture, but I plan to talk about so many cultures, and on those of which I'm uneducated on, which is a lot of those besides myself. Even on mine alone, I'll be bringing people in to talk about it who have more knowledge on it, so that we can all learn together. This is a space for learning, for mental and emotional and social growth. It's not a place of judgment. It's not a place of comparative analysis between cultures. There won't be any comparing, because each culture is valuable and in its indifference. No puzzle piece, no pieces in the puzzle are the exact same, because there's difference, there's uniqueness to them, and together we make this beautiful, beautiful puzzle of humanity. And understanding all the puzzle pieces and putting those together is what I'm going to be working on. So again, I just thank you so much for tuning in, and we will see you on the next episode of Once and For All. Whoop whoop.